Welcome everybody to our February 2022 Charlotte area SharePoint user group meeting. My name's Andy, and I'm going to be your presenter, host, MC, little bit of everything here today. We are broadcasting inside of our Microsoft team that's part of the Microsoft community, but additionally, we are also live streaming on YouTube. So I'm interested to see what's going on over there and how this is going to work. And we're just trying to open this thing up for the community. So a little bit of housekeeping as we get ready to begin. If you're new here, welcome. We are the Charlotte area SharePoint user group, but we do more than just SharePoint. We work in all of Microsoft 365 and the Power Platform. We try to have talks on all the different aspects of this platform each and every month, and we try to bring industry experts and really interesting talks to you. So if you're new here, welcome. But no, it's more than just SharePoint that we work with. Microsoft Teams, Microsoft List, which we're going to talk about today, but also Power Platform, Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate, also Power Virtual Agents, Planner, OneDrive, you name it. If it's in the Microsoft 365 suite, we probably work with it in some capacity. So with that, you can find us in a bunch of different places. Links actually up above. We're on Twitter, easy to find, CASPUG on Twitter. You'll also find us on Meetup. Meetup's one of our core places to collaborate and come together. We post all of our meetings there. We post the links to the recordings there, which are all hosted on our YouTube channel, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that's also a great place to ask questions, engage in the community, and we're trying to build that up over there. We've got upwards of like 865 members there, and it's growing, so feel free to join in there. We do have a Facebook page that we maintain. We're also on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn page. We also have a LinkedIn group, but we don't own the group. That was a previous owner, and so we're moving into kind of another area. And then we have a Yammer community that's closed, but you can request access, and we can join you into the Yammer community if you're interested in that. So a lot of different ways to engage with us. But I do want to say that we have worked really hard to grow our YouTube community. So that's why we're doing the live stream on YouTube here today. So really interested to see the YouTube community and how that's going to work out over there. So we're actually really easy to find on YouTube. In fact, we have a vanity URL over there now that you can check out. That is Charlotte area SharePoint user group. So it's YouTube/ Charlotte area SharePoint user group. Got a short little bit.ly link to get to it, bit.ly, CASUGYT. That's the easiest way to get to our YouTube. But feel free to join with us and check out what's going on over there. So today is about Microsoft List. I want to spend the next hour talking about Microsoft List and answering some questions and engaging and going over all things List. We were fortunate enough last month to have Will Cooper talk about list formatting and some of the really cool things that you can do with like conditional formatting and list formatting. If you haven't seen that video, it's gotten like almost 900 views, which is pretty cool. I think we got picked up by the algorithm. So hey, kudos to Will and that presentation. That's pretty awesome. That's on the YouTube channel, so be sure to go and check that out. But Microsoft made some announcements to List within the last month or so. And I proctored Will's session. I sat in on that. And I also sat in on our colleague, Daniel Christian. He and Reza Durrani did a bi-weekly R&D YouTube live stream. And their most recent one, they had Mark Cashman and Michaela Barrett from Microsoft to talk about List and some of the recent announcements and some of the updates and things that are there. I live stream with another MVP friend of mine named John Moore, and we do deep dives into Microsoft Teams. And I was like, you know what? The Microsoft List things that I've seen over the last few months are really, really cool. But also, there's some really awesome deep dive stuff that we should talk about. And I wanted to build on some of the conversations that I've seen over the last month or two and kind of put it all together in like a one-stop shop area and really deep dive into lists and talk about some of the really cool things that you might not know in there. So that's what this talk is all about. It's based off of what I've learned from some of the presentations from my Daniel and Reza's R&D show with Mark and Michaela. It's some of them building on what Will talked about back in January, but also there's been some things that have been released here recently that I am super excited about. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of dive into it and really deep dive into this and talk about some of the fun stuff inside of List. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I thought it would be really fun to talk about List by using List. And so what I'm going to do is this is going to be really meta. I'm going to use List to talk about List. I'm going to make a list of things that I want to discuss, and I'm going to walk you through all of those things, but I'm going to do it using Microsoft List, and I'm going to try and do this live. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it works, and it's fun. But I have a bunch of stuff to talk about. So if you saw the invite for the deep dive meeting, just a few of the things to kind of point out at a high level. We wanted to talk about how lists compare to SharePoint list. We want to talk about how lists can be used on your desktop and offline. We wanted to talk about the web, the desktop, the Teams, and the mobile experience. We want to talk about all the different views, sorting, filtering, and grouping, but also things like list view, gallery view, calendar view, and the new board view, and some of the ins and outs there. Wanted to spend some time breaking down cards and galleries and how those come together. Wanted to also talk about high-level form customization of view formatting. I'm going to provide you some reference material to kind of follow up and go a little bit deeper there. Wanted to talk about rules and alerts and notifications, but also compare that with integration from Power Automate and Power Apps and Power BI. And then some limits and some things that you might not have known about. And I am going to address one thing that I know a lot of people have a lot to say about, and that is list view threshold and the limitations there. There's some interesting things you might not have known about that are going to help you deal with that. And so I'm going to touch base on all of those things as well. So first and foremost, welcome to Microsoft List. This is a first-class citizen inside of Microsoft 365. It is an app that sits there alongside all the other apps that you have in Microsoft 365. So when you work with List, this is the Welcome to List interface. They got a nice little animation. It's pretty cool to check out. But this is Microsoft List. And when you're working with List, the first thing that you're going to see is this home experience. And the really cool thing about the home experience is that this consolidates all of my lists, whether they're private for me or they're lists that are in SharePoint and by extension Microsoft Teams. So it puts it all in one place. For me, it's one-stop shop. Now I'm in a development tenant. This is the community tenant, so I don't have a whole lot of lists here, but I use lists for just about everything in my day job. I want to list around everything. Kelly knows knows that. So I don't have a whole lot of lists here, but when I go into lists, there are two different types of lists. There are my lists that are for me, and then there are lists that are for my teams. So when I go and I create a list, and this experience I'll talk about more in a moment, when I'm in the process of creating this list, I get to choose my experience, whether this list is going to be for me, private for me, and I can share it with my teammates and my colleagues if I need, or whether this list is going to be associated with like a site or a team that I'm a part of. And so it'll be a Microsoft 365 group, or it'll be a Microsoft team that I'm a part of, and then we'll be able to work together in with that on that list. So that's really the first thing that's big. All my lists are in one place. It doesn't matter what site they're in. If I have access to it and I've worked on it recently, it'll show up here. If I create a new one, it'll show up here. And if I create a private list for me and my personal productivity, it's going to show up here as well. So that's one of the first big things. So the list app allows me to do that, but it extends across different experiences. So I can work with list here inside of my web browser, but I could also work with lists as part of a SharePoint site. So I could go to the SharePoint site and have the same great experience that I've always had there, especially since the modern update has happened. But this also extends lists into my web browser, but also into Microsoft Teams. So I can bring a list into Teams if I need it. And if I really need to, I can bring a list into my mobile app. So like I can go, I have a list app. I can open that up, and that'll allow me to access lists directly on my mobile device, which is actually really cool. So this is just showing all the different lists that I have and the most recent. And I can get to it right on my mobile, which is great. So I have lists in a number of different ways that I can experience. So having it as that first class app is really the first thing. So with that, I'm going to create a list, and I'm going to walk through all the different things that we can do. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to use the new list creation option. I see this here in Microsoft List, but you also see this in SharePoint. From the homepage of a SharePoint site, you can click on New, and it says List, and you get this same menu. So with this experience, there's a few things to point out. You can use a template. There are Microsoft templates, things like issue tracking, event itinerary, content scheduling. Those are great starting points. They can be completely customized. You can use the fields that are there. You can add or remove however you need. You can also create templates from your organization. So if your organization's uploaded templates, then you would actually be able to work with those right from here. But from an end user perspective, this really opens up the possibilities of listing what I can do. I can start from blank. That's just like creating a list in SharePoint. I get one field by default. It's called title, and I can add in any other columns, modify and create any views that I want, and I can format that list however I need. I can also start from Excel. This is really cool because I can take an Excel workbook and I can convert that into a Microsoft list and associate it with the site. The cool thing about this experience, the data that I import has to be formatted as a table. But if it's already in one of my sites, I can find it. Or if it's in my OneDrive, I can find it. Or I can upload from my local computer, which is great. And then the other thing that I can do is I can create a list from an existing list. Now, this is really powerful because this allows me to create lists across within a site from another list. I can copy it, the outline of it, the columns and the fields and the views. But I can also create these across site collections in my tenant. So if I have other site collections that I work with, I can create a list based off of that. So now we're going cross-site collection. And those of you that have been in the SharePoint world for a while, you know this used to not be really possible, at least not easily. So this is really cool. It allows me to recreate something and make it reusable as I need it. So for this example, I'm going to create one from Excel. So I have an Excel workbook. These are all the different topics that I want to talk about today. I've already formatted it as a table. So you do need to make sure that it is formatted as a table. My table has headers, title, description, category, and link. And I'm going to use this as the basis for importing my topics that I'm going to talk about moving forward. So I'm going to go in. Let's from Excel. Let's upload. I'm going to go to my desktop, find that Excel file, and then we'll go ahead and open it. Now this part's really cool. It's uploading it, but it's also interpreting the data that's in there. So I really like this piece about Microsoft List. So we'll let it load the table. Take just a moment. All right, so there was only one table in my workbook. It went ahead and found that, but if you're naming your tables and you have multiples, you'll be able to pick from that. All right, so now it's got the columns in my workbook. Now, I only had 4 columns in there, so it went ahead and it pulled those in. So there's the title field, and it's going to go ahead and reference that as title. That means that I can click on that field, and it'll open up the form for editing, allow me to make changes. And it'll create a form around that. The second one here was my description. It went ahead and identified that as multiple lines of text. The third one, it said that's a single line of text, but category for me is actually a choice menu. So I'm going to switch that up. So I'm going to say choice menu. And then the last one here, it's got this as a, I did like a hyperlink column. It's got this as a single line of text. But the cool thing is I can switch it up, or if I want to, I can omit that column whenever I import. So I can clean up the data before I actually import it. And it does a pretty good job of identifying one-to-one. All right, so I'm just going to glance through. I got a couple of blank cells, but I don't have any blank rows. So that's going to be really helpful. And everything kind of looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say next. Now it's going to ask me, what do you want to name this? So I'm going to give this a name. We'll say KSUG 2022. I'm going to give this color. I'm going to use the list orange, and I'm going to change the icon. Now, when I'm creating this, I get to choose where it goes. The default is my list, so that's going to be personal for me. But if I want to, I can put it in one of my teams or my Microsoft 365 groups. So like if I wanted to put it in Charlotte area SharePoint user group and open that up to my team, this is where I would actually be able to do that. And so I would see that in the Teams client right over here. So like it's going to be associated with this team. So I would be able to surface it through there. All right, so list deep dive KSUG. Let's go ahead and create that. All right, so it's going to create the list. It's just going to take a moment. What the data looks like at the time of upload is what it's going to look like in the list. And if the Excel workbook changes, there's no data update. There's no data connection afterward. All right, so I'm just going to scroll through, make sure my data came through appropriately. Everything's looking good. All right, so it looks like I got everything that I need. And the cool thing about the list, as you scroll, it does show additional items. So it does the paging. So it used to be you get 30 items per page and then you scroll over. Now you just have an infinity scroll, and as you scroll, it starts to load new items inside of there. So I can basically see everything that that I wanted to import inside of there. So with that, I've got my data to start with. So you saw how easy it was to convert from Excel. Now let's start diving into some of the things that we can do. So I've already covered the new list experience. That was the first item here. So new list experience. And with the introduction of lists, you got the new interface. Just walked you through all of that. It's really, really cool and really seamless. But additionally, they're also offering new custom list templates. I showed you that. You have the Microsoft specific templates. There's approximately 8 of those. And then your organization can upload templates as well, which is really cool. But those are just quick ways to get started. You can use the Microsoft templates as inspiration and kind of showcase the capabilities of lists and brainstorm, and then you can customize it to meet your unique needs. That's kind of the 80-20 rule. Gets you 80% of the way there, and then the last 20% is you customizing it to fit within your business process. So custom templates are built in and really helpful. So you might notice I'm opening the form. The description of what I'm talking about is above me. I realize it might be a little small, but I'm going to kind of zoom in on a couple things as we work and kind of go through this. And if I need to make it any bigger, I think I can do that. That's a little bit bigger. So just kind of let me know in the comments how things are coming through. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and let's continue diving in. So I mentioned the various platforms. So it does work in web. That's what you're actually seeing here. This is the web-based platform that I'm actually working with right now. But there's something really cool that you can do, and that's the desktop platform. You can actually work with this on your desktop. There's a desktop option that's available for your list, and that allows you to work with the list offline. So the desktop version is actually built on something we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. That's called a progressive web app. And with the progressive web app, it gives me offline access to the app, but it also allows me to synchronize and work with it back in the cloud. So we'll see that one coming up in just a minute, a little bit deeper dive. I showed you mobile just a few minutes ago. So that shows up on my mobile device, allows me to work right from there. I can create new lists on the mobile device. I can edit and work with lists that I already have on the mobile device. And I would also be able to share and interact right from the mobile device, which is really cool. And then it works in the Teams platform as well. So if I'm creating a list here, I'm going to be able to surface that inside of Microsoft Teams. So like, for example, I've got a channel here called Microsoft List. I'm going to go into my tabs at the top of the channel. And then from there, I'm going to go and I'm going to select List. I'm going to save. And then that's going to allow me to either create a brand new list using the Teams interface, or I can go and add an existing list that maybe I've already created. And here's the deep dive list that I just created. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. All right, and then now you can see the list that I imported a moment ago. It's now here inside of Microsoft Teams. So I can work with this directly in Teams. I've got my forms to be able to create new information. I can go and view information that's already there, work with it just like if I were in the web browser. And I'll be able to work with things like my views and my filtering, work and add columns, and I'll be able to do most of what I can do inside of the web interface, and I'll be able to actually do that here right inside of the Teams client, which is really helpful. So we get the web, the desktop, the mobile, and the Teams experience. But a couple other things to point out is you have the office.com experience as well. So if I go to office.com, and so I'm just going to navigate back to home. So this is the updated office.com. This is kind of the new version of it that's actually starting to roll out. You'll notice right over here to the side in my quick access area, my list is actually referenced. So here's taking me to the SharePoint site for it, but my list is actually referenced there. So like we can see recently created lists along other recent content. And if that's important to me, I would actually be able to favorite that. I have the favorite option. I can add it to my favorite tab and I can get back to it very quickly. And I don't have to go through the whole list of everything that I've worked on recently, which is really cool. So I'm going to be able to work with it from here, but also from Office Home. If I go to create, I'm going to be able, or not create, if I go to my apps, I'll be able to go right into my list and I can work from there. So there's the integration with Office Home to be able to get back to this and work as well, which is really nice. So they've updated the Office Home, and click on the plus sign. You're supposed to be able to go in and create a new list, and you'll be able to work from there. But there's one other thing that I want to mention as it relates to kind of Office Home and the SharePoint experience, and this is kind of new, and some people are starting to see this now. If you're in the SharePoint world like I am, we have this navigation along the side over here. And right now it shows the SharePoint start homepage. It shows my sites. Those are things that I follow when I work in. It shows my news, and then it shows my files. Those are like files that I work with frequently. There's a new button starting to roll out, and it's the list icon, and those are my lists. And it's going to be anchored on the SharePoint app bar, that left-hand navigation in SharePoint moving forward. So you'll see that on the left-hand side over there, which is really cool. So that's starting to roll out in some tenants now. It's in my test tenant. I've already seen it there. It's not in this particular tenant, but you're going to see that SharePoint app bar icon, and that's going to help the user to get back to Microsoft lists, and they're going to see some of their more recent lists. So lists are showing up in a whole bunch of different places, which is really, really cool. All right, so diving into the platform and some of the other workings of the list, as I'm scrolling through this, notice the title, the description, and the category at the top. See how that's actually frozen? They've already implemented freezing of panes. So when you're working with the list, they're freezing the panes at the top. They did this in SharePoint lists a few years ago. It's a subtle thing that not a lot of people pay attention to, but it freezes the column name. And so as I'm moving through the list, I still have that reference to the actual column that I'm looking at. If I have multiple date columns, that's really helpful. So freezing of the panes is actually built in. You don't have to do anything to turn that on. But they're also doing a sticky first column. So if your list is rather long and you have multiple columns and you're having to scroll left and right a whole bunch, they'll do a sticky first column. So as you scroll left and right, that first column just gives you a reference to maybe the first item that's there. So that's actually built in. All right, so continuing down the line, a couple of additional things I want to just mention as we're moving through. Syncing lists for offline access. So lists are actually built on a new platform that I'll talk about in the next couple of bullet points. But this gives us the ability to work with large and complex data sets. So these are very large lists with a whole lot of information in them. You can have up to 30 million items inside of a list. The syncing the list for the offline access is going to help you to work with some of that, but it's also going to help you to do things like working with sorting and filtering large data sets and dealing with the list view threshold, which is pretty cool. So with that in mind, there's the option to make this a progressive web app, and you usually see that up in the top up here. as you're working in a list, it'll say, you know, progressive web app, and then it'll give you the ability to basically install that on your local computer and then to be able to work with it. I think I have an example of one of those. So hold on one second. Let me just go through my apps real quick. No, I don't have one on this particular workstation, but it'll show up in the command bar or the address bar to make this a progressive web app, and then that'll allow me to actually work with it offline on my local computer. Now, what does that actually mean? PWA, progressive web app. Well, we can do progressive web apps with a lot of things. Like, for example, you can do a progressive web app with OneDrive. See, it says app available. That allows me to install this on my local computer, and I get the best of the web, and I get the best of an app, and it's available on my desktop. So they started pushing this out in a couple of apps, and List is one of the first ones to actually fully take advantage of that. So I get the List app. It's a progressive web app on my desktop. It uses local resources to kind of cache and work with the data. But then it also allows me to fully synchronize the results back to the cloud interface when I need to. I can add these to my start menu. I can pin them to my taskbar. I can work with the list. I can runs on user login. So I get the best of everything with that. That means I'm also going to be able to work with offline mode. So with offline mode, that means I can work offline. Any changes that I make when I connect back to the web are going to get synchronized through that connection, and that just gives me the flexibility to work when and where I need. So if I get on a plane, internet connection spotty, I'm going to be able to take advantage of that. So that's actually really really helpful. Now the cool thing about all of this, the PWA and the offline experience, is it's powered by Microsoft's Project Nucleus. Project Nucleus is something that Microsoft's been working on for a few years now. It was announced a couple years ago, and this is one of the first applications to really take advantage of it. But when you're working with Project Nucleus, it's allowing you to work with a web app and a local resource, and it consumes things on the local resource to make the app super fast, and then it synchronizes those changes back to the cloud. It's really cool the way they're doing that, basically tracking deltas and synchronizing those changes, so they don't have to synchronize the whole data set, just what changed in the data set. It's a really clever way of actually doing this. So this is one of the first apps to really take advantage of Project Nucleus, and that's how you get offline access with one of these apps. And they based it on the Microsoft.SharePoint.exe mechanism. It's actually going through the OneDrive sync client as part of this this process. So the OneDrive client is going to help to update and do some of the install mechanism, and it just helps to save on network bandwidth. It helps to eliminate bottlenecks, but it's going to help you to deal with one of the things that really frustrates a lot of users, and that's the next thing I have here, and that's the list view threshold. I saw in some of the previous presentations a lot of questions around list view threshold and the 5,000 item throttle limit. And I've got a couple other bullet points around this. I've got some links in the list that I'm actually using. But technically, yes, the list view threshold is still in place. That's a database operation, a database limitation if you're working exclusively through the web. But if I take this thing down and I do it as a progressive web app, desktop app on my local PC or Mac, and I work with it, I can get around that list view threshold because I'm using the local resources essentially to work with that. So I can queue tens of thousands of rows of data inside of there. Now, there's some guidance. Again, I've got that coming up in a little bit about how to work with really large lists. And some of the things that you can do are filtering and indexing. And you can index the column, and then you can filter, and you can narrow that down to like a subset of data if you're working in the cloud. Well, here, as I'm working locally, I'm going to be able to get around some of those limits because, you know, it's given me that local resource to really be able to go through and take advantage of. So that's kind of the first part of that. I got some more bullet points on that coming up in just a little bit. All right, so I'm moving through here, but I'm going to switch this up. I'm actually going to go and I'm going to organize these by my categories. and then kind of go through there. So we'll kind of circle back to columns and whatnot. So give me just 1 second. Gotta make sure I've got my notes up in the other window, so I'm following along with this correctly, as we're trying to do this in a meta way. All right, so I just talked about the platform a little bit, that kind of baseline, and then I went through some of the syncing options there. So the next thing I want to talk about is integration. So I'm gonna go to the integration category here. All right, so integrate. As I'm in the list, you'll actually see integrate right up here at the top. This is a drop-down menu, and this is some different terminology because they moved some things around and restructured, and it makes sense, but you got to unlearn what you knew before and then kind of relearn this this new thing. So when we talk about integrate, we're talking about integration with the Power Platform, essentially. So in this case, when we go to the integrate, you're going to see Power Apps listed there. That's going to allow you to customize a form, that the new or the edit or display form, or it's going to allow you to create an app that can use this as a data source. You've got Power Automate. That's going to allow you to build workflows on top of this. And workflows could be as simple as a notification. It could be a notification on column change, or it could be something more advanced. And then you got Power BI, and this allows you to do things like visualize the list. So you can create like simple visualizations using Power BI around that. And then you can provide insights into that data. So you got integrate as part of this, and those are the three things that you're going to see. That's a little bit different than it was a couple years ago. Power Automate used to be under Automate. Now it's under the Integrate tab. It's going to basically same functionality, but they're kind of mixing that up a little bit. So with Integrate, that's the Power Platform integration. All right, so I just mentioned Power App and Power BI and Power Automate integration. I'm going to circle back to some of that in just a little bit. All right, so next category I'm going to go through is let's talk a little bit about columns, because we're working with lists. I'm going to go into columns. So columns are how we collect data. We've got a column here: title, single line of text; description, multiple lines of text; category, that's a choice menu. Link is a single line of text, but if you look at the column creator, I could have done a hyperlink for that. So like an actual hyperlink column, it would format it as a hyperlink, make it an actionable item, which is really cool. All right, so with that, there's a couple of columns that I want to point out specifically. If you've worked in SharePoint previously, the columns that we've had since essentially 2010 are basically the same columns here. Microsoft did introduce a location column a couple years ago. I'm going to talk about that one in a minute. There's some updates there, but there's also some new things that you might not have known about. Like, for example, the lookup column is now here on the main interface. I don't have to go to more to find that. And there's going to be a couple of other changes coming up in just a bit. So I'm going to talk about lookup columns right away. That's the first thing I want to point out. Michaela mentioned this during the R&D show a week or two ago, and I thought it was really eye-opening. So first and foremost, the lookup column is now available in the modern interface. You don't have to go to more to get to it. So that's really, really cool. So that means we can create a lookup from this list to another list, which is really awesome. So I'll go in, I would say lookup. All right, where you're going to do a lookup, what are you going to pull from? What other lists are you going to pull information from? All right, so I would select the additional list that I wanted to pull from, and then it's going to say, well, you can get the title column and then all of these additional columns. So it works just like the lookup column we worked with before, just in the modern interface, which is great. And you can add one or more fields as part of the lookup. The main column is going to be the dropdown. The additional fields travel along with that. So if I looked up department manager, and contact information could travel along with that, and I could connect the two lists. So that was actually really cool. So that's in the modern interface now. But the other thing that really caught my attention was the increased number of lookups. When we did a lookup previously, you would get 20 items back, first 20 items. They've now extended that to 2,000 items. So I can look up from my source 2,000 departments and go down through that, find the department I want, and get the corresponding information. I think that's really awesome. So that is, for me, that's huge. I can look up and pull back 2,000 items inside of my list. That's game changing for me. I can think of a lot of use cases around that. So I think that's really cool. So that's a couple of things around lookups that I wanted to point out and deep dive on. All right, the number column. There's been some subtle updates there, some things that were quietly released that they didn't tell us about. I actually tweeted about a couple of these because I was like, whoa, wait a minute. All right, so the first thing, this was subtle, this was really small. Support for the thousandths separator in the number column. All right, so if you're working with, if you do a number column, all right, and you go down and you have this option, use thousandths separator. Sorry, it's right above my head there. Use the thousandths separator. All right, you can toggle that on or off. So you can put the commas inside of there, which is really cool. But the other thing that they did in the number column that was really quiet and I didn't see any official content around it was right here. How do you want to format that? You want to format it as a currency. You want to format it as a percentage. You have a custom symbol or value you want to use. I saw this pop up in the interface and I was like, whoa, hey, you should have announced that. So I tweeted about it last year sometime. I thought that was really cool. So some subtle changes that they're making inside of some of the column types. I think that's really cool. Yeah, Will saying that the thousandth separator is long overdue. Yeah. All right, so they made some changes with that. Another one that they made some subtle changes to, the yes/no column. So they updated the yes/no column. When you're working in what they call the grid view, and I'll show you that in a minute, they've made it so that you can work with the yes/no column inside of there very quickly. So for example, I'm going to go and create a yes/no column. I'm going to just call this like complete yes/no default value. I'm going to set that to no. These are my additional options, and I'm going to go ahead and save this. All right, so now I've got this complete column over here. So like if I've talked about this, I could go into the form and I get the yes/no and, or let me refresh and get that into the form. All right, so yes/no and completed into the value, and then I can check off on that. But if I go into the quick edit mode for the list, and we zoom out a little bit. If I go into the quick edit view for the list, that actually shows up in the grid view. And for some reason, my grid view is not showing right now. Oh, I know why. I'm in a grouping. Let me undo that, refresh. There's my grid view. All right, so like if let me go back down, I'm going to filter my category. So I'll go to columns. All right, and then there's the yes/no column. All right, so let me switch over into the grid view now. And then the grid view, they made it simple so that you can work with like yes/no values inside of there, which is really nice. All right, so that one's a subtle one that's been added, just an update inside of there. And I did see, I think, a toggle switch that they've added into that. All right, another subtle update is the rich text editor. Now, this one specifically, if you've got a multi-line of text field and you're using rich text, so there's plain text, enhanced text, and rich text. Rich text supports bold, italic, underline, but also things like hyperlinks and tables and whatnot. If you toggle that on, you can do that in your grid mode, which is really neat. So like if I switch this back into my grid view, and this is the column that I want to work with here. All right, so like I would be able to actually, if the column were formatted as rich text, I would be able to work with that. So I'm going to make a change to it. I'm going to adjust my column settings. I'm going to edit from the top. All right, I can do this while I'm still in grid view. More options, and I'm going to use rich text. All right, so I'm going to save that. All right, and so I should be able to go in and take advantage of the new rich text editor. So bold, italics, underlines, font colors, highlights. I can do that now while I'm working in the grid view or in that particular view. I think that's really cool. It's the little things. All right, so that's been adjusted. Another one that's really cool is the image field. Now, we've worked with images in a couple ways before, but with the image field, they've made it so that you can upload directly from your device without having to reference a URL. Used to be like if I wanted an image, I'd have to go put it in a library, get the path, and then link to it. Now I just upload it. So if I go into my list and I add an image, and I'll just call this like image, all right? And I'm going to go ahead and save that. All right, so I've got that column in there. Let's say I take a screenshot and I want to add that to the list. I would click on image, and then where it says add an image, I'm going to be able to upload. And I just go into my screenshots. There it is. That's going to upload, so it's pretty much one click. This one's subtle. Saving that, it'll take just a second. And then the image will actually show up. There's kind of a preview in there. I know it's kind of small, but it shows up right over there. There's a preview of that image right there inside of the list. So it's kind of saved alongside the list. That's really cool. And then there's another one that you can do, a thumbnail. So you can actually create a column called a thumbnail, and in a document library, it'll give you a preview of the thing that you're doing. And then the last one is the location field. If you haven't seen this one's actually really cool. It uses Bing Maps data. You can enter in an address, and then you can have one field for the address, and you can break it up into city, state, zip code, geo coordinates, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's like you could go in and say add a column. You could choose location. And as you're adding it, you can pick and choose what other types do you want to go along with this? How do you want to break it up? But the really cool thing is, like, if I do like the location field and you just type in an address, it'll autocomplete. But if I want to break it up, so like maybe I can organize it by like city or state later, I would be able to do that. So I can go in and say, okay, location city, let me edit this item. And then it's going to say location here. So like, I'm going to say like, I'll use a facility that I know. So like it's looking up a location, and this is the one that I'm looking for. So it finds the place for me, which is really, really cool. But then when I go back to the list, it actually separates that. And so now I have Charlotte, and I can use a sort or a filter right on top of that, which is really neat. All right, so location field, some cool things you can do there. And I see there's a couple of questions. Can you convert your link fields from a single line of text to a hyperlink? So like if I go and I choose like column settings and I edit, type is currently set to single line of text. I select the drop down. I can't convert it to the hyperlink column based off of the import. Unfortunately, I can't do that, but you can switch back and forth between a couple of column types. All right. Image field's nice compared to the hyperlink. Yes, I agree. Yes, it does work great on the mobile device. That's actually really cool. The map tiles, I think Will did some demos on that. You can tie those into some of your other solutions, which is really, really awesome. All right, that takes care of columns. So next up, I'm going to switch in. I'm going to talk about views. I got some view things I want to talk about. So I'm going to use my filter here. I'm going to go into views. All right, views. First and foremost, sort and filter. These things are still here. Sort and filter, sort alphabetically, reverse alphabetically. Those have been there. They're temporary until you decide to save or create them as a view. I can sort and filter independently of my colleagues, which is great. Speaking of filter, well, now there's the modern filter pane. So filtering reduces the number of items in the display. If you have a list view threshold issue, you can use the filter to narrow down that number of items to a subset and find exactly what you need, which is really great. There's a filter pane for this now. You don't have to go to the sub-menus to find it. The filter pane is modern, it's brought to the forefront, and you can filter across multiple fields at the same time. For the most part, if the field can be filtered, they'll show it here, but you can also go to any column, and through your column settings, you can add that to the filters pane. So you're going to be able to bring that right into the filters pane if you need it. So that's great. And then there's the filtering by column. I've been doing this the whole time. I just click on the column. I can apply my filter. I can clear my filter, and I can move through that. All right. So applied filters in the list. So as you apply the filters inside of the list, you narrow down the results. This helps with the list view threshold. It allows you to exclude what you don't need and narrow it down to what you do need. And if you combine this with column indexing, you can really make some progress towards some of the list view thresholds. Column indexing takes priority first, and then filtering can help you to narrow down beyond that. But the filter pane's built right in, upper right-hand corner, but you can also filter by column. There's the grouping. You've seen me do that a couple of times. So I'm going to clear my filter. I like the grouping option. So like, let me clear that again, clear all, apply. All right, so when I go to a category, I can say filter or group by the category. I can expand or collapse the entire category. I can open up a category as needed, which is really cool. But you can also drag and drop between categories. So like if you find something that's in one place and you want to switch it over to another place, you can drag and drop and you can move that to another category and it'll update based off of the field that you're grouping by. So in this case, if I were to take the sort thing and move it into the syncing category, it'll update that. Now it's going to be in the syncing category. So it allows me to just drag and drop between values and I can update, which is really cool. So that one's kind of subtle, but I really like that. And then I can use that to, move back and forth however I need. All right, so groupings. Now you saw that a minute ago, when I go into grouping, I can't go into the grid view anymore. So I have to exit out of my groupings in order to do that. And if I do decide to group by category, I can save that as a view. So I can create a new view or I can save that as a view. All right, group by category, save it. And then that's repeatable. That's a public view. I could also make a private view, but it's repeatable and I can get back to it anytime that I need. All right, so let's go back into our filter, narrow down to views. All right, so last couple of things here that I think are really cool that you need to know about. This is a list format. If I go to my group options in the upper corner here, I'm in the list format. If you have a really large list, you can go to a compact view. So let me clear my filter. All right, and then make sure I'm in the compact view and I can see more items. It just increases the density of what I see in the UI. But there's also this really cool one called gallery. That puts it in a card-like format. So now these are like cards and I can scroll through and I can still do things like filter down if I need to. So like if I want to filter down to a specific thing, like we're talking about views, I can still do that. Now it's in a card format. So this is what my card looks like. And I can click on one of these and I can edit and I can work with it, but it just gives me just kind of a different reference or visual around that, which is really neat. And then you can edit that current view. You can format the current view. And in this case, if I go to format the current view, it's gallery. It's going to say card designer. How do you want to edit that? Now I can pick and choose what I want to see on here. I don't want to see location on this. I can choose whether to see the labels or not. If I have an image, I can display the image on there. I can move these items up or down. And so I can go into the format view and card designer and I pick and choose the columns that show up in the gallery. And so now I can view this in a certain way. And this is what I'm going to see when I toggle from the list view into the gallery view, which is really helpful. All right, so I really like that one. Now for this next part, I need to go in and add a column. So this part's really subtle, but I'm going to go here. I can add a column in between fields. I don't have to go to the end to add columns. I can just go right here. All right, so I'm going to add a column in between. I'm going to say start date. All right, that's date and time. I'm not going to include the time. I just want a date. All right, and I'm going to go and add another column while I'm here. And this is going to be date and time. And I'm going to say due date. Same settings. All right, while I'm here, and I'm just kind of working with this, I'm just going to very quickly add a couple of fields to this. All right, so let me switch out of my grouping and let me go into my categories. All right, and then I'm just going to quickly add a couple of dates. So get the nice date picker. It's kind of showing up behind me. So start date, due date, that's done. Add another one real quick. And I could do this in the grid view if that's set up for me. All right, so again, just start date, date picker, super simple. You've used this. All right, so now I've got a couple of date and time options. All right, so now I'm going to go in, I'm going to go to all items, and then I'm going to create a new view. All right, so I'm going to call this my calendar view. I'm going to choose the calendar option, and it's going to ask me which fields do you want to use. If you have one date field, you can use the one date field. In my case, I have two, so I can use two. create blocks, make it a public view, and then what field do you want to see on the like on the block? Like, what do you want to use to identify the different types of events that you're working with? I'm going to leave it as title, but if I select this, I see a whole lot. I see across content types actually inside of here. So there's a lot of different fields I can use as the display of the block item. All right, I'm just going to do calendar, simple with title, and I'm going to create. Welcome to the modern calendar view. This is what it looks like in SharePoint Online. This is what it looks like in Microsoft List. You get this toggle for the day. So as you select a day, it'll show you events for that particular day. If there are none, it'll be empty, which is really nice. All right, so we get that nice calendar format, and there's some limitations to it. Currently, like I can go in, I can add a new item right above me, fill out the form, add that right into my view. I can go and click on a previous entered item, and I can expand that, and I can view it, and I can actually dive into it. But the things that I can't do, no color-coded overlays like the previous calendar supported. I know some of you really like that. That's not supported currently. So no color-coded overlays. And then some of the advanced things like filtering by content type and doing some things like that are not supported yet, but hopefully those things will come in the near future. But I get a nice calendar format, and it's modern and it's responsive. So like, for example, if my window changes, it's responsive based off of the resolution of the window that I'm in. Now, there's also no options to synchronize with things like Outlook and Exchange, but I get a modern calendar, which is nice. All right, so let's go back to our all items view, and then we're in the view section. So one last one, we're here. This is the one that I'm really excited about. This is called the board view. So the board view is new, just started rolling out in the last few weeks, and the board view basically gives you swim lanes based off of a choice column that allows you to move items from one column to another and update the properties. It's really good for things like Agile-based processes, Kanban boards, for instance, moving through phasing inside of a list, for instance. It's really, really helpful for that scenario. So let me just show it to you, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so I'm going to go in. I'm going to create a new view. I'm going to call this the board view. I'm going to select board, and it's going to ask me which choice column do you want to base this off of. I have a category, and I have the complete's also a yes/no field, so it does support that as well. I'm going to do this based off of the category, and then I'm going to create it. Now I've got my nice board view. All right, so I can see the board view. I can scroll left and right. I can view everything in there. I can click on an item, view more details related to it. But the board view is interactive. So, for example, this is unassigned, assigned as sticky. Well, I know that belongs to something. So like I can scroll through here and I can say, well, this actually belongs in the platform area. And then it just updated that that item sticky, and it gave that value in the category field. So I can drag and drop between here, and really, really simple, really, really cool. And I can use this for things like a phase-based approach. So as I'm moving through one category, phase, or to another, this is very similar to what you have in Planner for buckets. Now, I don't get any of Planner's visualizations, any of the charts and analytics. I don't get the out-of-the-box integration with things like To-Do and Microsoft Teams, but I can work with things like Power Automate on top of this. I can create my own custom columns, so I can build my own planner, add in my own custom columns, and do whatever I want. There's some really interesting thoughts around what this means, or what the flexibility of this is, and what you can do versus what you can do with Planner, which I think is pretty cool. As I'm in the board view, if I need to make updates, go to the dropdown, and you can customize the card. And so I can make changes to this, like what do I want to see on top of the card, show the columns as labels, just like in the gallery before. So I can pick and choose exactly what I want to see on this, and then how I want to work with it. I use the board view in a lot of stuff that I do. I've had it in my tenant for a little while now, and it's starting to roll out into some other tenants, my work tenant, and I'm using it there all the time. I'm a huge fan of this. It's Agile-based approach to taking information and working with it. Now, I did notice a couple of limitations I want to point out. choice menus, that's what it's going to work with here. Also, the yes, no column. I can't do anything though, like I can't resize the column width. Will's asking about that. I can't do that. And I can't, the ordering here, like I can't drag to make changes to the ordering, but I did notice the ordering is based off of the choice column. It's the order that the columns show up in like my choice menu. So like if let me switch back to like my all items view. So I'm gonna clear out my grouping. So like my category field is what I chose. So like if I go and I view the settings related to that and like the choice values that are in there, it's actually based off of that. I imported this, so these are not in here. But like if I did a column, like let's say I did a column and I called this choice, and then I did phase, and I had like phase 1 and phase 2 and like phase 3 inside of there. That's going to be the order that those actually show up. If I created a board view around that, and then I reference that phase field, it should put those 1, 2, and 3 in the order that I created. So then like I can use this and like, so the ordering here is based off of the choice menu ordering. So whatever column you use for the board format, that's how it's going to order those particular columns. Now in this case, because I imported these, it doesn't reference them in that particular order. So that's another thing to be aware of if you do like an import like I did. Now, if you really want to get deep in the woods on this, you can format and you can go and you can edit this in advanced mode and you can get into the JSON and you can do some crazy stuff inside of there, but that's JSON. I don't do JSON, but I copy and paste. So I would work there, but you might need to go get somebody that's JSON proficient in order to make some real changes there, and you can make some more ordering there. But as far as things like dragging to reorder or anything like that, it's not supported, but I did want you to know it is based off of, like if it's a choice menu, the order of the choices that you add inside of that menu. Michaela said on the R&D show that they are exploring drag and drop in the future, but there's nothing on the roadmap for that right now. All right, so that's the board view. That's really cool, but I do want to show you this. Like if I go to my SharePoint site where this list is associated with, all these views transfer over. So I saw Microsoft list, but because I saved this to a team in a SharePoint site, I can use all of these over in my SharePoint site. That leads to some really interesting capabilities because I can do something like in SharePoint, like add a page. And so we'll call this our list page, and then I can go in and start adding web parts. All right, so I'm going to be able to add, let me just say this is a draft. Seems to want to give me some problems today. All right, so then I'm going to go in, I'm going to add a list web part. All right, I'm going to reference that deep dive list, and I'm going to edit this, and like I can leave this in the default view, which is the list view. Actually, I'm going to just leave that. I'm going to scroll down, and underneath this, I'm going to add another list web part. All right, and so this one, I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to put it in the board view. And scroll down. Let's add another section down here. We'll do a 2-column section. And down here in this section, I'm going to do another list view web part. And I'm going to put this one in my calendar format. And then maybe over here, I'm going to do a list properties web part. I'm going to connect it to something. And I'll say, one of these list web parts on my page. And then I'm just going to publish this. And what I've done is I've taken that same information and I've put it on this page in like 4 different ways. So I have it as a list format if I need to see it, or if somebody would prefer to look at it in, well, I didn't take the calendar format. Way to make a liar out of me in the demo. I'm going to fix that. Calendar. Make sure there's not a hidden apply button behind the banner. Thanks, Microsoft. You should have removed that banner. I'm going to give them that feedback in the frowny face in a little bit. All All right, now I'm going to do my board view and apply. There we go. All right, republish. And now when I go back to the page, I have a nice calendar view at the top. If I need to scroll down, there's my board view. And yes, it is interactive in this view. All right, then I can go, there's my list format. And if I've done the connector right, it'll connect the list properties over here. All three of mine were named the same thing, so I didn't have any identifier as to which list I was connecting to. But as I select something in one of these lists, depending on how I connected that web part, it'll give me the properties. I can use this to create one-stop shop. It's the same list, but it's in like 4 different variations, and that's just different ways to interact with it. But I can add in a whole bunch of other stuff. And then once I have this page, I can also take this and I can bring it into Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to say I want to pull from SharePoint inside of Teams. All right, pages. There's my list page. I'm gonna go ahead and add that. Now I've paged it in to my team. So like I'm now providing one-stop shop there for the nice calendar view, the list in its different formats, the interactive board view, and any other content that I need. And I can work with that right inside of Teams. Super, super cool. So using all the different boards, there's a lot that I can do with that in different ways to interact with it. All right, we're pretty close to the end. If you stick with me for a few more minutes, I got a few more things I just want to kind of go over. I did the grid view a couple of times. You've seen the grid view. Just a few things to point out about the grid view. They have in keyboard improvements. So now you can edit faster in the grid view. So you can use tab to navigate across the rows and columns inside of there. You can click enter on a new row and save items. You can press escape and that'll actually close the editor out. So there's a few different things with the keyboard improvements in there. But grid view should also be referred to as quick edit. It's renamed. It was quick edit. Now it's a grid view, and you do not see it in the group by format that I'm in. You can, though, modify this and then save it as a view as you're working. I did a demo of that earlier. And you can access the column settings as well, which is really cool. So as I'm working in here, I can modify, I can show and hide columns, I can format a column, I can work with adding a column. It's like if I were to exit out of my group by option and get back into my, let me just save this and get back into my grid option. It's like if I'm in the grid view and there's something that I just don't want to see, like I can do things like show and hide columns while I'm here, so I can remove those from this format. And then if I need to like go and add new columns, I can do that right inside of here. And I can do all of that in the grid view as I'm working, in addition to like working with some of the moving through. All right. Going back through the categories. So I just covered grid view. I did the web parts just a second ago. So like I walked you through all the different web parts. So we saw that. So actually, let me go back to the filter. Yeah, so we did the web parts, the list, the gallery, and whatnot. You saw that all live. All right, next up. I'm going to do both of these kind of quick because we've covered these in depth in a number of resources. So there's column and view formatting. Will's done a couple of great sessions that are recorded on our YouTube channel. April Dunham and David Warner did a deep dive into that as well. So we've got 3 or 4 recordings of column formatting and view formatting to definitely check out. But it's really simple for you to do no code or low code solutions to format a column and make changes to it. But a couple things that I want to point out. Depending on the type of column that you work with, some of these have formatting options that are applied out of the box. So for example, if you're working with numbers, the data bar is an out-of-the-box option. That's like a progress bar. If you're working with a choice menu, a date field, and yes, no columns, you can conditionally format the color in the background automatically. Choice columns also have the ability to do pill-shaped backgrounds. And so what that looks like, let me switch out of my filter here. All right, so let's say I went to like my category field and I started modifying this column. Like I have choices inside of here. So like if I said that this was platform, for instance, I could color code it very quickly and very easily. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to just make a quick change to my show hide columns, and I'm going to bring in um, what's that column I created a minute ago? My phase column. All right, so see my phase? It's already got color coding built into it. All I did was create a choice menu. So I just went in and created a choice menu, and it started doing the pill for me. But if I have like a number field, and I want to do formatting on the number field, and I just go into column settings and I say format, data bars is a default option in additional condition format, and I don't have to go into the advanced mode. So there's just a couple of subtle things that they've done related to the formatting and to the rules there to allow you to do like the color coding. And I just wanted to point out it applies to the number field, the fill color for the number field, the date field, and the yes no field, and the choice field. And the choice field also supports the additional options. And if you want to learn more about the advanced formatting, go see Will's talk. He's got a really cool editor that you can take advantage of, a bunch of free stuff, and then some additional options. And then there's also the PMP community has a ton of resources for JSON formatting that allows you to do some of that stuff way more advanced. SharePointDashboards.com, that's Will's site. That's in the chat window for anybody that's interested in that. Speaking of other formatting, you could format the view. So depending on the view, you could do conditional formatting based off of rows, or you could alternate the style every other item in a gray background. And you can do that across an entire view, which is really cool. So like, let me clear the filter here. All right, so now every other item's highlighted in gray, makes it easier for me to read as I'm moving forward. But I could go in and format the view, and I could do conditional formatting here, or I could go into the advanced mode and I could do JSON. And there's a whole bunch of learning resources and examples right from that link that you can take advantage of, and some really, really cool things that you can do. There's a full reference of all the different formatting options that are available, as well as Will's site. Some really cool stuff you can do with that. All right, so you could format the entire view. You can also format the form. This guy right here that I use to collect the data. So we've done some examples on that. Will and April and David covered that as well. But one of the new options is to configure the layout. So we have a single column layout, label, and then field control. Well, you can go in and format this in a different way. You can add a custom header, you can add a custom footer, and you can add a body to this, and you can organize the body. There are references, a doc from Microsoft on how you can do this, configure the list form. It's at docs.microsoft.com. When you can customize the header, you can do things like an icon and format the text that's there. You can customize the footer. And with a footer, you could do things like contact information, an actionable item. And then when you customize the body, you can organize into columns. You can do 4 columns, and you can group those into sections. And you can organize, and you can make your form wider. And so you don't have to do things like scroll up and down on a super large form to get to everything. You can make it nice and neat and organized. And you can do that with some simple copy and paste JSON inside of the form. So we had some examples in previous sessions on that, but that's built right in. So you just go to configure layout, and then there's a link to the formatting options right above, and then you can copy and paste some of that, or you can go check out Will and April and David's work in the PMP community around that. So formatting on the forms, that's pretty cool. All right, last couple of things. I realize we're at time. I just have a last couple of things that I want to point out, and then I'm going to do some Q&A, and we'll kind of go from there. I'm going to do settings and sharing. These will be the last things that I cover. All right, so I mentioned the list view threshold earlier. Because this app is built on top of Project Nucleus and you're using the OneDrive Sync client, I can create this as essentially a local desktop app, and that's going to help me to work with that. But if you want to really get a handle on how to deal with list view thresholding. Microsoft's guidance is 1, indexing, and 2, filtering. Filter and index down to a subset of items to get to exactly what you need. I did see a question in the chat window earlier about list view threshold as it applies to Power Automate. And so I just want to briefly take a moment on that. So I'm going to go to Power Automate for just a second. In Power Automate, when you work with that, and I'm going to test the account, so I don't know if it's going to work. All right, so in Power Automate, you need to learn how to filter to get down to a subset of items. That's going to be really the only way that that you can really do this. So you're gonna need to learn the different filtering techniques that Power Automate supports. So when you work in Power Automate, there's a couple of things that you can do. There is the trigger conditions. So you can specify a condition, and if that's met, you can use that as a way to narrow down the results to a subset of the items inside of your list. The limit columns by view wouldn't mess with that. But what you can do is there's a SharePoint action, and you can use the SharePoint action and you can get items. And when you get items, one of the options is to do a filter query. And the filter query uses OData. So for example, this column, this operator equals this value. You need to learn OData. There's some resources that Microsoft has available for this. You can click on the little help icon in the upper right-hand corner in Power Automate, and you can learn more about get items. And that's going to take you to Microsoft's documentation, and they're going to talk about OData and the filter queries. There's also some other reference material that teaches you how to format that. So if you're working with Power Automate, you really need to learn OData filtering. That's how you're going to use Power Automate to filter a large list and get around some of the limitations. So filtering happens with OData. You're referencing the name of a column and the values inside of that column. The values go in single quote. The column name is what you're going to apply. That's your first operator or your first item, and then you choose the operator. So OData is how you're going to get around some of the query limits. That's really important. All right. So Microsoft's going back to list view. Index first, then filter. Indexing, the first column that's indexed is the primary filter, and then a secondary filter can help you to narrow down. But again, if you're synchronizing this offline, essentially, you can work with much larger sets of data. All right, last couple of things. Export to Excel. I'm on a Mac, so this currently says CSV, but the roadmap says that export to Excel is going to update, and you're going to have the option in both Windows and Mac to export to a workbook or to a CSV file. That's on the roadmap. It hasn't rolled out yet, but it's stated for March of 2022. Updated sharing experience. This is a list. If it's a my list, it's for me. If it's a Teams list or a group list is connected to a team or a Microsoft 365 group, that's for we, and my team can work with it. But with that in mind, I can share the entire list using the share interface. So I can go in and share, and I can say, who can this link work for? What can they do with this link? Edit the list, edit items, or just view. Who am I sending this to? Name, group, or emails. What message am I sharing, and who is it currently shared with? And now I can grant you access to my whole list, read only, or allow you to edit, or I can allow you to edit certain items inside of my list. So I can share my list, whether it's my private list or it's a list that's associated with my colleagues and my team. So the sharing experience really allows us a lot of control over how other people interact with this. And then the last couple of things, comments. This has been here the whole time. I haven't mentioned it until now. But when I'm working with this list, I might need feedback from a teammate or a colleague. So I can @mention and I can provide a comment in line with the list and all the other things that are actually happening there. So we get the comments option. You can get a teammate's attention by @mentioning them. They'll receive a notification and it'll bring them right to that list item. And then they'll actually be able to review and work on that. So all of those things are really, really cool. I think there's so much more going on here. I could probably do a 2-hour session on this. This is the first time I actually delivered something like this. So I'm going to make some notes. If you have any suggestions for improvements, let me know. I thought this would be just a cool little way to demo some of the deep dive stuff in here. But again, I've got some more stuff I could probably go over, so I need to narrow it down. That being said, this list that you're seeing right here is for enterprise. I'm in a production tenant essentially, but Microsoft recently made this available list as a personal productivity item for anybody that has a Microsoft account, whether it's a Hotmail account, an Outlook, or a Live account. So you should be able to go. I believe it's let me see. They created a custom URL for it. Yeah, list.live.com. So lists are in an MSA preview. 200,000 people are going to get to check it out. You can use this for you, for your stuff outside of the enterprise. You just need a Microsoft account. And the cool thing about it is when you create one of these, you can invite a family member, a friend, or a colleague into it, and they just log in with their Microsoft account, and then you can collaborate together. So there's like a family, we could have a grocery list running inside of here, or a list of, a phase list, or, something like that. But this is actually brand new. It's built on basically everything that we saw in the enterprise. Just started rolling out, but the first 200,000 people are going to be able to test this. And if you do test it, go find Cashman on Twitter and tweet at him and show him what you're doing. Find Michaela Barrett, Microsoft Michaela, and show them what you're doing out there, and show off your list and your stuff. With that, thanks everybody. I appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed this. Check out our YouTube channel. We are Charlotte Area SharePoint User Group on YouTube. Also, be sure to check out Daniel Christian, his YouTube channel. He and Reza Durrani. Reza Durrani has spoke at our user group, but they do a session called R&D, and they had Michaela Barrett and Mark Cashman on their R&D channel here recently. You can get some more information from that particular talk. That was, yeah, just got to find it. Microsoft List Overview, this guy right here, right above my shoulder. That's where Mark and Michaela talked a lot about some of the stuff, and that's what inspired this. Folks, I talked a whole lot. So if you have any additional questions, send those through in YouTube, send those through on the Microsoft Teams channel. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks everybody for being here. And I'll stick around for a couple questions if you have it, and let me know what you thought about the YouTube experience for those of you that joined in on YouTube. I'm interested to see. I know the audio wasn't there for a few minutes. I got to work on that. I did record this in Teams though. I'll upload that version as well. But yeah, check out our YouTube. Let me know what you thought. Send me some feedback. But that's all I got, folks. Thanks everybody.